I asked my manager for a raise and they said no. But over 10 years later, I still think about what they said because it sent me down a path to reformulate my understanding of career growth. So what did they say and what did I make of it? Let's get into it. A few years into my career, I was getting positive feedback, I was taking on projects, doing them well, completing them on time, and generally feeling pretty good about myself and my performance. At one lunch, I was talking to one of my friends who'd started the same time as me, and I had learned that she'd gotten a big raise just by asking for it. She was a good engineer and she definitely deserved it, but I felt like I deserved it too. So fueled by jealousy or regret that I had never thought to ask myself, that day in my one-on-one, I went to my manager and asked for a raise. This is not a video about when or why or how to ask for a raise, but if you're interested, let me know in the comments because I have experienced both good and bad. I'll put a link up here if and when I make it. So after asking in my one-on-one, I received the most roundabout no, but the diagram they drew that day still sticks in my mind and it's changed the way I think about career growth. You can think of your performance or output of your work as the amount of good you do and the amount of bad you do. Good is finishing projects on time, doing things well, improving the code, leveling up your teammates. Bad could be causing issues, doing things poorly, breaking things, or being generally disagreeable to work with, whatever it is. Now, I'm certain my manager wasn't trying to say anything bad about me, but he successfully ran out the clock before he had to officially say no. I walked away pretty confused about what that all meant, but I mulled it over the next couple weeks and formulated this mental model of what growth really means. At first, looking at this diagram, it's weird that they're independent axes, but bear with me. Imagine on these axes, you could sit either here or here. Now, one way to think about your performance is to ask, how much good am I doing versus how much bad am I doing? Now, of course, the real world is not easily quantifiable, but as a mental model, you can look at where you're sitting on this chart and compare the amount of good you're doing minus the amount of bad you're doing to get some sort of metric. In this case, looks like we're doing more good than bad, but maybe not a ton. We can do the same for this other person. Subtracting the amount of bad they do from the amount of good that they do, looks like they're actually doing more harm than good. That's not a great sign. Comparing these two hypothetical people, of course the person doing more good than bad is doing better. But what about these two people? Well, the sunglasses math is the same. For the other person doing the subtraction, it looks like they're doing more good than bad, so that's great. But comparing the two, the difference is exactly the same. So how can we really think about the difference between those two positions on the chart? Another way to compare them is just the absolute magnitude of the stuff that they're doing, i.e. the distance from the origin. And here, of course, there's no contest, proving once and for all that monocles make you smarter. When you're starting out in your career, you're probably close to the origin. The projects you're working on are maybe not the biggest, so the impact you can have is fairly small. The scale of the good that you can accomplish is limited, but also, you can only do so much harm. As you grow, you move farther and farther away from that bottom left. You take on bigger and bigger projects, spanning longer periods of time, more engineers and more teams, more critical to the company's success. As you're doing so, hopefully you're staying above that center line, doing more good than bad. So finally, looking back at that meeting with my manager, I think they were saying, while I was doing more good than bad, they wanted me to increase the magnitude or scope of my work. And while they left most of the legwork to me to formulate all these ideas, I think there's one key point, which is that going straight up is impossible. Try as you might to go directly up while avoiding any negative consequences, your progress will be really slow. If you're going to rapidly increase the scope of your role and move up in the company and get those raises, you'll have to accept that some failure and mistakes are part of the process. It's self-defeating to try to aim directly up. Aim outwards, try to stay above that center line, and pretty soon you'll find yourself way more senior than you ever thought. Allow yourself some failure, and don't let it hold you back. So while this story started out with rejection, I find this mental model really empowering, and it applies to so many things. Any project or endeavor you take on, don't be afraid to make mistakes and don't let it hold you back. For me, I have perfectionist tendencies, so at the beginning of a project, I like to plan out everything down to the last detail before we get started. But this mental model reminds me that perfection is impossible, and it's okay if unforeseen issues come up during a project. It's about finding that balance where you've put in enough work to save time later, but stop before your marginal returns diminish past the point of being worth it. Of course, knowing which corners to cut and which corners will come back to haunt you takes a little experience. Let me know below if you want to get more into that topic. It's freeing to remember that mistakes are inevitable, and trying to avoid them will only keep you from reaching your fullest potential. If you're as inspired as I am, let me know in the comments if and how you'll apply this to your career. Drop a like below and subscribe so you don't miss the next video. And whatever you have in mind, go out there, get it done, and be your best self. See you later.